Alright, what is up, everybody? It is the Saltiest Gaijin coming to you here on YouTube. Really just to talk about some of the upcoming cards here in Magic's latest set, Strixhaven, which becomes available on April 15th on Magic the Gathering Arena. Not only is Strixhaven going to be adding in, of course, the normal set of cards with the just the standard set that's coming in, we're also going to be seeing, kind of a subset of reprints, the Strixhaven Mystical Archive, which is going to add in, 56 cards to Arena's historic format, albeit some of those cards are reprints that are already on Arena. Looking at you, Duress. But it's also adding a lot of cards that Arena doesn't have already, and some of those cards are really incredibly powerful. So, absolutely excited to kind of see how we're going to, how these cards are going to shake out and how they're going to really slot into both existing historic strategies as well as maybe some new ones that might be getting a big power up here. So before we get into the list proper, we have our honorable mentions. There's a few cards I wanted to touch on. So, I want to start by saying that I think for our number 5 and number 4 card, I think a lot of these cards could have probably been interchangeable with those because they're a lot more speculative than, say, our bottom 3 cards on the list. But, there are absolutely some really powerful cards in Strixhaven, so very exciting. So we'll start by getting our honorable mentions. We're going to mention 4 cards here, actually. Oof. It's a lot of honorable mentions. But the first one I wanted to touch on was less of a card and more of a mechanic. We're getting a bunch of cards that have Storm on it. And Storm is a very powerful mechanic. Matter of fact, it's one of Magic's most powerful mechanics. So much so that we grade the power level of mechanics on the Storm scale. With 1 being awful, bad mechanics, and 10 being Storm. So very just kind of put that in perspective of how powerful those cards can be. We're getting a handful. The one that I think stands out above the rest is like being this card that will, if anything takes full advantage of the Storm mechanic, it'll be this one. That's the card Grape Shot. It's probably the easiest of all of the Storm cards they're printing to enable because it's only 2 mana. And so you don't need to make a whole lot of mana. You just need to end your flurry of spells by specifically having 2 mana left and casting the Grape Shot. So there's already combinations of cards both from Strixhaven and prior that can really make a flurry of red mana and cast a whole lot of spells. And so it'll be interesting to see how that slots into the format. Not exactly sure how good that will be, but definitely a something to mention. Next here in our honorable mentions is Day of Judgment. So Day of Judgment is effectively just Wrath of God in this format. Because the Wrath of God clause about regeneration doesn't mean anything in Arena. Because there's no cards that regenerate. So I wanted to mention Day of Judgment in that it adds another differently named Wrath of God style effect to the format. In this case, just a functional Wrath of God. Which, not necessarily a huge part of the metagame, but there are cards like Meddling Mage that exist in Historic. So, definitely an interesting option to have differently named cards so that you can get around effects like Meddling Mage. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how the format, especially in closed format settings where it's not like the ranked open play, how that really shakes out and to see if that ever becomes an interaction. Because that's something we have seen in Modern, where Meddling Mage gets a bit more play in the humans decks that run around. Our next honorable mention here is one of my favorite cards in the archive. It's Electrolyze. Electrolyze is a solid control card that offers a very clean way to gain card advantage. Even if it kills 1 creature or if it kills 2 creatures, it's just very powerful. If it kills 2 creatures, that's just a massive upswing. So this will be a card that I think its power level will be decided by how many decks are playing 1 toughness creatures. So who can really take, and in those cases, then which decks can find a home for Electrolyze and really leverage that advantage in a positive way. And then the last card here is a card that I'm not particularly excited to see come to Arena, but it's Time Warp. Time Warp is not a card that I like. I'm not a big fan of taking turn style effects like this, but it's a card that I wanted to mention because I know a lot of people out there really do love it. And, I'm all for people loving however they like to play Magic. So I see this being a card that will probably see a good bit of play, especially, kind of in that ranked open queue, just because people love it so much. Alright, now before we get into that top 5 proper, of course, if you like the kind of content we do here at the SaltiestGaijin channel, remember to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. As well as you can find us live on Twitch at twitch.tv/TheSaltiestGaijin. Be sure to check us out there as well. We not only play Magic, we do some variety games. We try to engage a little more directly with our community, and we even do fun giveaways here. Which right now we're even doing a giveaway where our goal is to get 50 followers, and then those first 50 followers will be entered into a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. From me to you. That's free money on the table. So I know I like free money, and I know you like free money. So check us out there on twitch.tv/TheSaltiestGaijin. There will be a link to our channel in the description below. But now back to our list. So coming in at number 5 here, we have a very interesting card, Memory Lapse. So Memory Lapse is a very powerful effect. It's a counter spell akin to a card like Remand. So you counter the spell, and then it puts that card back on top of your opponent's deck, essentially setting them back a turn. So this is a very powerful card that if you're playing against decks that, say, are going to use a lot of temporary resources to play a really big card, like say a bunch of treasure tokens, you could take, that's where it's really going to be at its best. But even if your opponent's just tapping out for a really big card, and you can counter it with Memory Lapse, as long as you are pressing some kind of advantage, that's a kind of tempo swing, as we call it, that could really be game changing. It's a way once you've gotten ahead, you stay ahead, is the kind of card Memory Lapse is. Now, there's plenty of competition in those kind of aggro tempo decks for a 2-mana counter spell, so not sure if Memory Lapse will really fit into that, but definitely a very interesting card to bring to the format. Very excited to see it, to kind of go into that toolbox moving forward for those decks. Our number 4 card on the list here is a card, one of my personally favorite cards in the list, is Lightning Helix. Lightning Helix is a very aggressively slanted removal spell that not only fits into those aggro decks, it also fits into things like the control strategies. It's not the best in mid-range decks, but giving control decks really a tool to not only deal with the low-drop creatures that aggressive decks will come out with. It's also a way to gain some life and stabilize the game, but it's also a way for aggro decks just to have reach. So a very good card at kind of the two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. So it'll be very interesting to see, really how Lightning Helix slots in, to the format. There's not a clear home for it, at least at the current moment, but definitely a card that I think will make, blue-white control decks consider playing red, right next to Electrolyze in that way, or even some of these say mono red aggro decks starting to bring white into the picture. Maybe we'll start seeing some more burn-style strategies play white. Should be very interesting. Now here, before we get into the bottom 3 cards that we have here on our top 5 list, I want to start by saying that these cards are at a very clear power level jump from all of the previous cards. They're cards that will find homes in Historic, for sure. Existing homes for them, but also just they might even forge new strategies that were kind of there but didn't have the the power level that they needed. So it'll be very exciting to see how these cards especially slot in the format. So our number 3 card is Faithless Looting. Now, our newest iteration of Faithless Looting is definitely not a looker, but it has, with all the work that Faithless Looting can do, it definitely has an awesome personality. So, of course, I'm really excited to see Faithless Looting come into the format. Faithless Looting is a very interesting card in that it is a very good graveyard enabler that offers you a massive amount of card selection, not card advantage. Now, if you're putting things like Arclight Phoenixes in your graveyard, you mitigate that discard portion of the card, and that's really where this card will shine, is decks that want to put cards into their graveyard and want to find specific cards out of their deck. So, decks like Is It Phoenix? That's an existing strategy that is kind of in the format, but really is missing a lot of power. And not only is Faithless Looting, but even a card a little later on our list, offers some really powerful upgrades to that deck. But also an existing strategy is Rakdos Arcanist. It's another deck that is kind of there, but struggles a bit on the power level scale. But Faithless Looting just will fuel that deck very well, and it's very exciting to see how that'll kind of fit together. But we might even see some interesting decks. Like a interesting deck list from a recent STA Games article written by Jerry Thompson about Faithless Looting. He wrote not only about Is It Phoenix and Rakdos Arcanist, which are kind of two of the more obvious strategies we'll see Faithless Looting slot into, but also there's like reanimation shells using cards like Unburial Rites, and that'll be very exciting to see Faithless Looting and how that slots into the format. I just know in any case we're on here the SaltiestGaijin channel gonna be playing a lot with Faithless Looting, so we're gonna be looking at Faithless Looting quite a lot. Moving on, though, we have our number 2 card, and the card that out of every card in the Mystical Archive, I am the most excited to see come into the format. And that number 2 card is Inquisition of Kozilek. So this is a card, Inquisition of Kozilek is a hand disruption spell that's been historically paired with Thoughtseize to provide like black-based mid-range decks. The type of disruption they need to get ahead of not only aggro, not only control, but also combo decks. We've seen this combination be the backbone for decks like Modern Jund, Mardu Pyromancer, as well as for Modern, as well as countless other homes for players, including myself, like just in homebrew strategies that try to fit into the format. So it's a very, very powerful effect. It has a drawback that it can only get cards that cost 3 or less, but realistically, if we even just look at Arena. Okay, so it can get pretty much most of the aggro deck's creatures. It can get the counter spells from the control decks. It can get kind of the mid-rangey creatures and low drop removal spells from other mid-range decks, as well as it can disrupt combo strategies by taking key cheap combo pieces. So very exciting to see Inquisition Kozilek come to the format. Another card that's going to slot really well into decks like Rakdos Arcanist, but I think we might even see just a wider variety of these black-based mid-range decks come into the format now that they have access to kind of a wider suite of hand disruption spells. So very exciting to see this come into the format, to say the least. Lastly, here on our list, our number 1 card for Historic coming from the Strixhaven Mystical Archive is Brainstorm. Brainstorm is a card that when I first looked at it and thought about Historic, I was like, I don't really see us being able to take full advantage of this card. But to give people a little bit of a background who aren't familiar, Brainstorm is the most powerful card in Legacy. It is the foundation of that format and has been really sent for really as long as I can remember. And I've played Legacy as far back as 10 years ago. Let alone, and it's even been a format much longer than that. So, it's a backbone of Magic's second most powerful standard constructed format. And when it's combined with effects like in those formats like fetch lands, essentially free ways to shuffle your deck, you can really get around Brainstorm's put the 2 cards on top of your deck drawback that it offers. But realistically, even if we can't take full advantage of, say, that kind of synergy, Brainstorm is really just like the best cantrip possible. You get to look at not only the top card, which is what a normal cantrip would offer you, you get to look at the next 2 cards, and then put 2 cards you don't need right now back on top of your deck. So it's going to offer us this kind of wide variety of card selection. But there's also effects like, we have Fabled Passage. Like, we have ways to shuffle our deck. We have different search effects. We have ways to, like, mill ourselves over, say, like, strategic planning and things along those lines. So I think Brainstorm is going to be a very powerful card to come into the format. And we touched on Is It Phoenix? And the Arclight Phoenix strategies that we've seen in the past, especially in formats like Modern. not only does Faithless Looting do a really good job in that deck, so does things like Brainstorm, just letting you see more cards for 1 mana, and then you can put cards back and you can utilize an effect like Strategic Planning, for example, to really get around this drawback, or you can say put a card like the Arclight Phoenix from your hand on top of your deck, and then you can mill it out using stuff like Strategic Planning. So it's a very powerful card that I see having a lot of interactions. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of decks playing this, and I'm sure we're going to be playing plenty of decks with it as we try out new deck lists when Strixhaven drops. So it's a very powerful card, and really probably going to be if we find the right synergies with it in the format, it will be head and shoulders above the rest in terms of power level. Of course, that's our list. That's a lot of really powerful cards. Very exciting to see the Strixhaven Mystical Archive, come into the format and really just add this extra layer of power on top of, the already powerful Strixhaven set, main set, which is really exciting. But of course, more importantly, what do you think of the Strixhaven Mystical Archive? What cards would have made your top 5 list? And let us know in that comment section down below. And please remember, like we talked about, please hit that like button and that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content. And again, go ahead and check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/TheSaltiestGaijin and give us a follow there. We really appreciate the support. So of course, I'm really happy that we can now bring you a YouTube video per week that isn't just our Twitch replays. So of course, we're very excited to be making more and more content for you. So any support that you can offer us is very greatly much appreciated. So thank you for watching, and we will see you again soon.